Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex topics and really try to break them down, give you that knowledge shortcut. Today, we're diving into, well, the bedrock of desktop 3D printing, polylactic acid, PLA, basically. Anyone who's used an FDM printer, you know the filament kind, you've almost certainly started with PLA. It's just everywhere. But our mission today is to get past seeing PLA as just the starter plastic, the simple stuff. Our sources point to a whole ecosystem built on it, lots of variants, lots of trade-offs.
That's absolutely the core idea. People start with standard PLA, sure, but then they quickly see things like PLA plus silice, silk PLA, matte, or even the composites, filaments mixed with wood fibers or metal powder, even carbon fiber, and to really understand those, to figure out, why you choose one over the other, maybe sacrificing looks for strength or vice versa, you have to get standard PLA first. It really is the benchmark. Everything else gets measured against it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So let's start at the beginning, the origin story. What is standard PLA, chemically speaking?
Chemically, it's an aliphatic polyester. The proper name is polylactide. And the first thing that really sets it apart, especially from plastics people might know, like ABS, is where it comes from. It's not petroleum-based.
Ah, right. The whole bioplastic angle starts here.
Exactly. It comes from renewable resources.
Yeah.
Things rich in starch, so typically corn, but also sugarcane, cassava.
Yeah.
Plant-based stuff, which is, fundamentally different feedstock.
Okay, so how do you get from, say, cornstarch to a spool of filament I can load into my printer? What's that journey look like?
Well, it starts with biology, actually. Microorganisms. They ferment the sugars and starches. That fermentation process creates lactic acid.
Okay.
Then that lactic acid goes through some chemical processing. Polymerization, basically turning small molecules into long chains, the polylactide chains. Those chains, once they're processed into little pellets or granules, get melted down and extruded, pulled out into that fine thread, the filament, usually 1.75 millimeters. That's kind of the standard now.
Right.
And yeah, that plant origin, that's the whole basis for marketing it as a bioplastic, which is a term we definitely need to unpack later because it gets complicated in practice.
Yeah, I can imagine that bio label carries a lot of weight, maybe more than it should sometimes. But okay, before we get into the controversies, let's look at why it got so popular, functionally. Every material is a compromise, right? So what makes PLA the go-to for so many people starting out?
Number one reason, it's just easy to print. Really easy. It melts at a relatively low temperature, prints at low temps, which means the printer hardware doesn't need to be anything special. You don't need an enclosure to keep the heat in. You don't need a high-temperature heated bed.
Yeah.
Unlike, say, ABS or nylon, which are much fussier.
And the warping, that's a big one people complain about with other materials.
Huge difference there.
Yeah.
PLA has a much lower coefficient of thermal expansion compared to something like ABS. What that means in practice is it shrinks way less as it cools.
Ah, so less peeling up at the corners on the print bed.
Exactly. Much less corner lift. And it leads to really good dimensional accuracy. The parts you print are actually the size you design them to be. That's, well, pretty important.
Definitely. And then there's the experience of printing it, the smell or lack thereof.
Yeah, that's another plus. It doesn't kick off strong, nasty chemical fumes.
No.
Lots of people actually say it smells kind of sweet when it's printing, like waffles or cotton candy sometimes.
Huh. I've heard that. Still need ventilation though, right?
Oh, absolutely. You should always vent any 3D printing, just as good practice. But it's definitely less offensive than many other plastics.
And maybe the biggest factor for beginners, cost.
It's incredibly cheap. It's usually the most affordable filament you can buy. Globally, you're looking at, maybe 10 to 20 US dollars for a kilogram spool. Depends on the brand and quality, of course.
Yeah, we saw figures from the Czech Republic like Prusman, a premium brand, running maybe 400 to 700 Czech crowns, which is still firmly in that entry-level bracket.
Right. That low cost makes it super accessible. But, and this is the big but, that accessibility comes with trade-offs, major ones. The biggest weakness, the absolute #1 issue with standard PLA is its poor temperature resistance.
Oh, yeah. The classic left my print in a hot car story.
Exactly that. Its glass transition temperature, that's the point where it starts to soften, is only around 60 degrees Celsius, 60 C.
Which is what, 140 Fahrenheit? Easily reachable inside a car on a sunny day.
Easily. Or even just in direct sunlight sometimes. The material just starts to sag, deform under its own weight. So any application where it might get hot, forget standard PLA. Definitely not for outdoor parts or anything near heat sources.
Okay, so heat is out. What about mechanical strength? People print tools, gears, little gadgets. Is that just asking for trouble because it's brittle?
That's a really good point. Standard PLA feels quite stiff and strong, especially in tension, like pulling it apart. but its impact strength is low. It's brittle.
Meaning it snaps rather than bends?
Precisely. Under sudden impact or high stress, it's much more likely to just crack or shatter, not deform or flex. So yeah, for parts that are going to take hits or bear significant mechanical loads, standard PLA isn't ideal.
Can you work around that with print settings, like more infill?
You can mitigate it a bit. Higher infill, careful orientation of the part on the print bed to align the layers optimally for the extracted stress. That helps. But fundamentally, you can't change the material's nature. It's still brittle at its core.
Gotcha. And the final weakness, the enemy of pretty much all filaments, moisture, hygroscopic.
Yep. PLA loves to absorb moisture from the air. It's hygroscopic. And damp PLA is bad news for printing. You'll hear cracking or popping sounds from the nozzle as the water instantly turns to steam.
What does that do to the print?
Causes all sorts of problems. Visible bubbles or voids in the print, really poor layer adhesion, meaning a part is weak and lots more stringing. Those annoying little threads between separate parts of the print.
So storage is key.
Absolutely critical. You must store PLA dry. Best practice is in an airtight container, maybe even with some desiccant packs thrown in, like those little silica gel packets.
Okay, so knowing the pros and cons, let's talk settings for getting the best results, despite the challenges. Temperature seems crucial.
It really is. For the nozzle, you're typically looking somewhere between 190 and 210 degrees Celsius. That's the common sweet spot. Some PLAs might go a bit lower, some slightly higher, maybe up to 230 C, especially some of the modified ones.
Is there a trade-off within that range, like hotter versus cooler?
Definitely. Running cooler, say closer to 190, generally helps with things like bridging over gaps and getting cleaner overhangs, less drooping. Running a bit hotter, maybe 210, tends to give you better layer adhesion. The layers bond together stronger, making the part mechanically tougher.
Makes sense. What about the print bed temperature?
You definitely want a heated bed. It makes a huge difference for getting that first layer to stick reliably. The recommended range is usually 50 to 60 degrees Celsius.
And not hotter. I've heard warnings about going too high.
Right. If you push the bed temp much past 60 C, you risk getting elephant's foot. The bottom layers stay too soft for too long and get squished outwards by the weight of the print above them. Screws up your dimensions at the base.
Okay, 50-60 C for the bed. And cooling. We want to cool the plastic fast once it's extruded.
Yes, active part cooling is vital for PLA. You want that fan blowing hard. Typically, you have the fan off for the first layer or two just to maximize bed adhesion, but then ramp it up to 100% power. That rapid cooling solidifies the plastic quickly, which is key for sharp details, preventing droop on overhangs and minimizing warping too.
Good tip. And speed. How fast can you realistically print PLA?
PLA is pretty forgiving, speed-wise. You can get functional parts printed anywhere from, say, 40 millimeters per second up to maybe 100 millimeters on many printers. But if you want the absolute best visual quality, really smooth surfaces, sharp corners, you need to slow it down. Probably keep it in the 40 to 60 millimeters range. Speed is generally the enemy of surface finish quality.
Okay, let's switch to troubleshooting. The classic PLA problem, stringing. Those fine hairs of plastic everywhere.
Yeah. Stringing. Usually caused by filament oozing out of the nozzle when it shouldn't be, like during travel moves, often made worse by moisture in the filament.
So first step is?
Dry your filament. Always the first thing to check. If it's dry, then you look at your retraction settings in the slicer software. You might need to increase the retraction distance, how far it pulls the filament back, or increase the retraction speed, pull it back faster and sharper, maybe tweak the nozzle temp down slightly too.
Right. Second common issue, warping. Corners lifting off the bed.
That's almost always about uneven cooling and the resulting shrinkage, even though PLA shrinks less than ABS. First defense. Make sure that print bed is absolutely clean. Isopropyl alcohol is your friend here. Degrease it properly.
Use the heated bed, as you said, 50-60 C.
Yep. And if you're printing something large with a big footprint on the bed, use a brim setting in your slicer. That adds a single layer thick border around your part attached to it, increasing the surface area touching the bed. Really helps hold down those corners. You just peel it off afterwards.
Smart. Okay, last one. Clogging. The dreaded print failure where the filament just stops coming out.
Clogging can have a few causes. Sometimes it's just impurities in cheap filament. But with PLA, a common culprit is heat creep.
Heat creep. Explain that.
So the hode end of your printer has a cold end section before the nozzle. It's designed to keep the filament solid until the very last moment it hits the melt zone. Heat creep is when heat travels up from the hot nozzle area into that cold end.
Ah, and softens the filament too early?
Exactly. It gets soft and sticky higher up where it's not supposed to and jams the pathway.
How do you fix that?
First, Check that the little fan cooling the heat sink on your cold end is actually working properly. That's its job, to prevent heat creep. Sometimes, slightly lowering your printing temperature can help. Or, counterintuitively, sometimes reducing your retraction distance can help, so you're not pulling potentially heat-softened filament too far back up into the cold zone.
Interesting. Okay, so you've got your print finished. Now, making it look good. Post-processing. Sanding is the obvious first step for layer lines. But you mentioned PLA's low temp resistance.
Yeah, that 60C glass transition tip bites you again here. Dry sanding PLA is tricky. The friction generates heat really quickly, locally, and the PLA softens and starts to almost like gum up or drag instead of sanding down into a fine powder. Makes it hard to get a smooth finish.
So what's the trick?
Wet sanding. That's the recommendation from pretty much all our sources.
Using water while you sand?
Yep. Keep the surface wet. The water acts as a coolant, preventing that heat buildup, and it also helps wash away the plastic dust. Much smoother process.
And you'd work through different grits of sandpaper.
Absolutely. Start coarse, maybe around 200 grit, to knock down the main layer lines, then move progressively finer. 400, 800, maybe even 1500 or 2000 grit if you're aiming for a really, really smooth, almost polished look.
Okay, wet sanding. But what if sanding isn't enough or too much work and you want to completely hide the lines? Painting.
PLA actually takes paint quite well. But like any painting job, preparation is everything. Clean the part thoroughly first, degrease it. If the layer lines are still pretty visible, you probably want to use some kind of filler first, like automotive spot putty or a spray-on filler primer.
Sand that filler smooth, then prime.
Exactly. Get a smooth base with the filler primer, then apply your color coats. Acrylic paints work great, whether they're spray cans or brush-on model paints. And always finish with a clear coat, a varnish, to protect the paint job.
Now, a really important point. With some plastics, like ABS, people use chemicals like acetone vapor to smooth the surface. Is there anything like that for PLA, a safe chemical smoothing option?
This is super critical, and the answer is basically no, not for the average user. Our sources are unanimous on this. There is no safe, commonly available chemical solvent that will effectively smooth PLA surfaces like acetone does for ABS.
I have seen mentions online of things like chloroform.
Exactly. You might see mentions in very specialized, maybe industrial contexts, of things like dichloromethane or chloroform, but these are hazardous, highly regulated chemicals, seriously dangerous stuff to handle without proper equipment and ventilation. The health risks are significant. It's strongly discouraged for any hobbyist or home user. Just don't go there.
Right. That seems like a vital safety warning. The ease of PLA doesn't justify messing with dangerous solvents. Stick to sanding, filling, painting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The risk is just not worth it.
Okay, let's wrap up with maybe the most debated aspect of PLA, the environment. It's marketed as ecological, biodegradable. How true is that in reality?
Yeah, this is where things get really muddy, and the marketing often outpaces the reality for the consumer. PLA is technically biodegradable. That part is true. But, and this is the crucial but, only under very specific industrial composting conditions.
Okay, so biodegradable does not mean home compostable.
Absolutely not. They are very different things. You cannot just toss a failed PLA print in your garden compost bin and expect it to disappear.
What are those specific industrial conditions it needs? You mentioned 3.
Yes, 3 key things have to be met and sustained. First, high temperature. Consistently above 55, ideally closer to 70 degrees Celsius. Second, high humidity. Moisture is needed to kickstart hydrolysis, the chemical breakdown of the polymer chains. And third, you need the right community of microorganisms, specific microbes that can actually metabolize the PLA once it starts breaking down.
And those conditions just don't exist in a home compost pile or landfill.
Or the ocean.
Not even close.
Yeah.
In your backyard compost, in the soil buried in a landfill, or certainly in the ocean, those conditions sustained high heat, high humidity, and the specific microbes all at once are never met.
So in those environments, PLA persists for a very, very long time, years, decades, potentially hundreds of years. It behaves much like a traditional plastic.
So the only way it actually biodegrades in a reasonable time frame is through industrial composting. What's the problem there?
The problem is infrastructure, or rather the lack of it. Most cities, most municipalities simply do not have the necessary industrial composting facilities equipped to handle and process PLA waste correctly. Many facilities that do exist might not even accept it.
So for the vast majority of people using PLA right now, the biodegradable aspect is functionally irrelevant.
For most users, yes, that's the practical reality. Unless you happen to live in one of the few places with a dedicated collection and processing stream for PLA, your only real disposal option is mixed waste. Landfill, essentially.
Which completely negates the benefit of its renewable origin from an end-of-life perspective.
Pretty much. And worse, if PLA accidentally gets into the standard plastic recycling streams like the ones for PET bottles or HDPE jugs, it acts as a contaminant.
How so?
Because its chemistry is different and its melting point is much lower, it messes up the recycling process for the other plastics, potentially ruining the whole batch of recycled material.
Wow. Okay, so this has been a really deep look at PLA. We started saying it's the easy gateway drug to 3D printing.
And it is. It's affordable, easy to print initially, but we see it as far from simple. That really low temperature resistance is a killer ab limitation. The brittleness is a real factor for functional parts, and the whole disposal story is much more complex than the eco-friendly label suggests.
So the big takeaway for you listening has to be understand what you're buying. Standard PLA is the baseline, but it has these significant weaknesses, and that's why all those variants exist, right? The PLA plus O, the tough PLAs. They're trying to address these specific shortcomings, usually brittleness or sometimes heat resistance.
Exactly. They use additives or slightly different formulations to try and improve on those weaknesses. So, given that standard PLA really hits its limit at just 60 degrees C, here's the final thought we want to leave you with. Think about the specific job you need your printed part to do. Is it purely decorative? Is it going to be under any stress? Will it be anywhere warm? Ask yourself, for this specific application, is standard PLA actually good enough? Or would spending just a little bit more on a specialized variant like a PLA Plus for better impact resistance be a much smarter investment in the long run, giving you a part that actually lasts? Choose the material for the job. Don't just default to the cheapest or the easiest.
A perfect point to end on. Really think about the application. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.